Good evening, everyone. Uh, what we got tonight? Gonna make a couple more tool handles. Got some sort of homemade parting tools that I use for my classes at Woodcraft. And I was using other handles, and it's like removable handles. And I'm like, oh, I don't need the removable handles on these anymore. So I'll just make handles for them, and then we'll be done with it. Just, it's just some simple red oak. So they'll have a little weight to them. We might even have a go at trying to dye one and put some grain filler in one of them. Just sort of just because, I guess. Okay, drill chuck thing back here. Probably want to be out nice and wide. You won't be able to see much. I determined around 7/16 of an inch diameter. It's going to be our drill bit hole. I'm going to use a Forstner drill bit for this. Everybody does this differently too. This is kind of the method that somebody showed me at some point, or I saw somebody do, and kind of like this method a little bit better. Don't really need to drill super deep down. Um, think about it a minute. See where I have these ground back at. By an inch and a half. So that should work. So about an inch and a half deep. No real rocket science to that. Sort of pick a number. It's got to be deep enough for it to make it substantial to hold. That should be good enough. So I've marked both ends, center. Make sure I got no kind of defects that I need to work around, which I don't. It has the bigger dimple hole in that end. So just bring the live center up. Hopefully find the hole. There we go. Just so that it's basically sitting between those two points. And in order to get the whole thing in the picture, I guess I can move it over a bit. Yeah, that'll show that way you can see what we're doing. I'm gonna grab a tool rest. That'll be long enough. I'll leave it up fairly high so that when I bring it in here, I can bring it up sort of close to the center of this blank. And I'll literally put it up against it so that this blank really can't hardly spin. So as we start to drill, we'll be in better shape. We'll drill a nice slow speed. You see the drill bit tries to torque the piece of wood quite quickly. Can even back up just a shade. I can't back up a shade. I'll drop that in my center hole. So we'll drill all in one shot. And just back off the pressure just a little bit, and I'll shut the lathe off, and then we'll remove it. Because I do not have, on the headstock, I don't have any kind of draw bar on there, so I don't want to back this out otherwise, or we could have an issue. We'll just do it by hand. A little safer that way. Clean out the flutes. We're going to have two of them to do, so I might as well get the other one. We'll do them both at the same time. We'll just mark centers. Yes, once again, it doesn't have to be perfect. These are pretty square blocks. These were cut on the table saw and joiner and all that good stuff, so they're pretty close to being square. A little deeper hole makes it a little easier to line things up. We'll stick one point on the brad point bit, bring the live center up onto the other one. Tiny bit of pressure. It's just sitting on them too. Bring the tool rest up again. I could even have it a little bit higher yet. I'll try and get it nice and even with it. That way it can only move a little bit. Because this would be a very good place for you to get your fingers really pinched nicely. So we'll just drill up to our tape. Stop. We'll remove it by hand. Like I say, because this would be a good place to have a serious problem. Might take a couple extra seconds to do it this way, but I have no real grip on the piece of wood to be able to pull it off of there while it's spinning to start with. Like I say, that's how I do them. I know people, I could take that and put that in the chuck and drill from the tailstock end, but I find to me, this is a little bit better in some ways. Not that it has to be perfectly centered, because we're going to put it between centers and turn it on that axis. So it really isn't going to make a whole lot of difference. So we'll put a cone center over that live center so it can go in that hole. And we'll just use a stub center on the other end. And one at a time. Squeaky, squeaky. Just enough pressure to make it drive. We don't need a ton of pressure on there. This is kind of going to be or at least we'll start out with the Probably start out with the skew. Whether we stick with the skew the whole time or not is another story. I find it to be a little bit slow to use the skew for some of this stuff, but we are going to go sharpen them. So we'll go over to the grinder. I have two different ones to sharpen. And we'll put a fresh edge on those. Start with grinder's already set. Must be set a shade bit different than it was the last time. These are both radius views, which is sort of is what I like to use. And we'll use that side first, so the burr can stay there. It'll come right off as soon as we touch it to the piece of wood anyhow. This is a bigger one. It's definitely different than that. I'm going to move the rest just a little bit. Take another sweep and we moved it too far. That should be all we need on them. Trying out my setup for the store. I bought myself the Milwaukee pack out system to take the stuff that I take along to a class, for a class, I should say. I was messing about with that yesterday, and trying to figure out what all fits in what drawers. It makes sense to come back over to here and bring in just a shade. I think I should back that way. This is where it becomes difficult to get things even remotely close. Tool rest is quite high because we're using a skew. Tool rest needs to be, we want to cut at about 11 o'clock. So tool rest generally looks quite weird because of how high up it has to be. I said this was echoing the last time. Okay. So that's probably just a smidgen on the high side. As always, stand off to the side. Bring the speed up to what you're comfortable with. This is oak, so we're going to probably have to peel it all, or yeah, do a planing cut rather than a peeling cut. Shut the shower curtain so we don't cover a workbench. They're still not round. Let's see what it'll do with oak. Is one of them that doesn't necessarily like to do the peeling part. Probably splinter things up pretty good. We'll take a look at it because that's definitely a faster way of doing it. See, it wants to tear it somewhat. Let's just get rid of our corners first, and then we'll go from there. We're getting there. Now around on that end. I'll make the other end round. Should just get the long tool rest out. It'll be easier. Don't have to move it quite so much. So now we're to the round, and that's what I was afraid of. There's always some of this goofy grain somewhere. So it doesn't like going that direction. So let's go back the other way and see what it'll do. Well, it feels like it smoothed it out. Not really. But we'll deal with that. We got a lot of shaping to do with that. So now, drop our tool rest down. We're going to put a ferrule on this, which is going to be a piece of copper pipe, which I'm sure has plenty of burrs on it. We'll just take a little round. Actually, this is chainsaw file. Doesn't matter what it is. A little file to be able to get in here and knock this the burr from cutting it with pipe cutters. Otherwise it won't slide up over the piece of wood very well. And of course be careful what you're doing, because how are you this fine evening? Should have did this ahead of time, but time doesn't always permit things. There, that should take care of that one. These are about 3/4 of an inch long, somewhere thereabouts. So we need an inside diameter. So we'll set our calipers to that. We'll just move them a smidge. You can always take more off, but we can't put it back on. So, and now we need a parting tool. We use the wider one of the bunch. I like the wider ones for this kind of work. Actually, the really better place to start would be to actually mark how long it is. At least thereabouts. Because it is kind of a pain if it gets to be, if you make them too long and have to deal with trying to cut some of this off up here. So it slides over it. Make it a little wider. And then we'll see whether it fits. Which it shouldn't, and it doesn't. But it's not much off. So we can take a little bit more. It'll get glued in place eventually. That would actually be a pressure fit right there. If we can do that the whole way back, that would be fine too. A little less troublesome with the glue part of it. You know, just a bit too tight. Looks like there's a little bit of a hump in the middle. Ever so slightly. It's probably the most time consuming part about making a handle. Still getting a bit too tight. one of them situations I could actually just pound that on. We'll take just that a couple extra seconds to remove that little bit. And I generally get too loose. So it looks like we can go back to our line. Don't want to shove it on there too tight because it's still getting tight at the very back. So our line looks like it's a good mark. So now it fits right on there. So it looks like we could take a smidge off. Yeah, you can actually turn that little bit of copper off of there too. High-speed steel tools will cut that pretty easily. It has a tendency to get a little on the warm side when you start cutting on something like that, but so the closer I can get it, the better I like it. Even if the wood would stand a little proud of it on something like this, it's certainly not there. It's almost like perfect. So that's what we want for that. I guess we can do them one at a time. Get them both to the same stages, I guess. They usually use 5-minute epoxy for something like that. And grab that quick little piece of paper. How are we doing this fine evening? Trying to get a popsicle stick to mix this epoxy. This is kind of the farting around kind of part of the process of this. Other thing I didn't do, I wanted to put some little grooves in there for the epoxy to key into the wood and the copper. So just use the corner of the parting tool. Just go in and create a couple little grooves. Gives it a place for the epoxy to go into, as well as stick fast to the copper. So I'm trying to get things out of the road. Just simple 2-part 5-minute epoxy. And if I'm smart enough, I'll use part of the paper, and then we'll do the other one on the other hand. This is going to be a tool handle for just a small, simple parting tool. Show you here once I get this on there. I have 2 of them to make. I pretty much, when it comes right down to it, I make my own handles for pretty much everything I have. I don't buy the tools with the handles already in place. Unless I would buy them like secondhand at some sort of sale or something like that, maybe. But I'm kind of a fan for the most part of the Thompson lathe tools, so they come unhandled anyhow. And it's easier to store them and especially easier to travel them or teach classes or something like that, and you want to take some of your own tools along, it just makes life a little bit easier. Like I said, piece of copper tubing, pipe, wipe off the excess. Not that we won't turn that away eventually, just less messy to get rid of it now, preferably without getting it all over my fingers, of course. So that's that. What this is going to be, this will be a parting tool. This handle, probably going to have to do a little bit more grinding. Maybe I should have went a little bigger on the hole. Or I measured that at 7/16, and it looks like it could have very easily been a half. So we'll let that set up because we're not totally dead in the water on something like that. I can re-drill this out a little bit deeper. So this will slide down in, and I'll put epoxy on both sides of it to hold it in. This is just a piece of steel you get from Amazon. This was, I think, 6 mil thick, and they're all in millimeters. I'm going to say 6 by, what would that be, 5, 10, 12? Something like that. Roughly about a half an inch wide. They're a little less than a quarter of an inch thick, and they are about 8 inches long, I think, when you get them. Yeah, about 8 inches long. Um, I haven't looked lately. I should look because I bought, when I originally bought these, I bought them for this purpose, was to make a parting tool. These are metal lathe cutters, so they are good high-speed steel. They may not hold the edge that um, like a Thompson tool or Carter or somebody, any of those, they're a higher end steel or whatever. But for a parting tool, and you can make 4 of them for $20. That's, to me, that's where it's at. That's sort of where it's at on something like that. Makes it economical. How's that? That 7/16 is not. No, we're going to do them both the same. So the other blank, we'll get it round. I may not fart around with the skew on the second blank. We might just go right to the spindle roughing gouge, which will probably need sharpened, of course, but it'll make it a little quicker, a little easier. So I'd like to get both of these done, because I do have a class coming up next weekend. As always, we're going to stand off to the side, bring the speed up. Mainly getting rid of the corners. It won't be a pretty finish using that, that's for sure. But it doesn't really matter. Just getting rid of the corners, making it round. You can get the bevel in contact with the wood, make it a bevel supported cut. It's a little bit cumbersome with this, especially going to the right, but it can be done. It'll give us a much smoother, cleaner cut. Right now, all we're interested in is getting it round. Because we're going to have to fit the other ferrule. Piece of copper tubing. I didn't, when you cut copper tubing with a traditional plumber's wheel cutter, I guess you would call them, it always leaves a burr on the inside. So a little round file. This happens to be a chainsaw file. So it's sort of a fine file, just to get rid of that burr on both sides, both ends. One that could cut your fingers if you stick your finger in there. Makes it harder to get a good fit for the ferrule. But it makes a nice cheap ferrule, because I mean this copper tubing is not super expensive. I probably shouldn't say that because I haven't bought it in quite a while. But you can go to the big box stores and buy like a 18-inch long piece or something like that, and that lasts a long, long time. This is probably, I think, 3/4 inch. It has some stuff that's like an inch or an inch and a quarter, which that stuff's sort of a pain to work with because I'm not a plumber, so I don't really have a good way of cutting it. A lot of times I actually will hacksaw it off, which is sort of a pain, but it does work. So that's the end of our ferrule. Same tube, so I already have a set of calipers. This this is one of these cheap sort of calipers, but always make sure, I think I did even with these, a lot of these all come with usually a sharp point, which that end's sharp still. This end has got to be rounded over to be able to use them to do something like this. Otherwise they'll dig in and you'll be wearing them. Just till it goes over. It's step proud. And we'll try not to mess around as long with this one as I did the other one. No, I'm not even close on that one. So what we can do is just give it a taper right on the end. We know it's not close, so we put a little bit more back here. Generally, the taper on the very end of it will soon tell us pretty quickly where it goes over. So it just slides over the very end of the taper, so now we know we can go back and take that taper and basically take that taper and go straight back with it. Just a real itty bitty bite. Want it to fit fairly tight, and the glue is going to take up some of the space, but the way I look at it, usually you get it to where it slides on there, so that could have actually been a little bit tighter. We still have another 1/16 of an inch to go back further yet. So our line was a pretty good mark. So we'll go back to our line. Make some little grooves for the glue to go into, just like the other one. I'll check one more time. That's like just about perfect. There might be a little bit sticking out the end. It's not a big deal if that would bother you, that it was sticking out a little bit. You could just, once it's complete, take it over to a disc sander or something like that and just touch it to that. Sand everything nice and flush and smooth. But at the end of the day, it is a tool handle. I'm not a manufacturer of tool handles, so it doesn't need to look super fancy. I mean, none of the manufactured tool handles really, they really don't do a super bang up job on them anyhow, as far as I would be concerned. So we know we're going to enlarge that hole. So I'm going to go back down to this end. I'm going to put a little bit of a tenon on down here, because I will grab this one this time in the chuck, and we'll drill from the other end just to enlarge that hole, hopefully with good success. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do a bunch of grinding on them, which I could do that too. It really probably really wouldn't take a whole lot of super long time to do that, but we'll try one of them with re-drilling it to one size bigger. But for now, we'll go back to our epoxy. Something I maybe could have, should have did earlier today, but life always gets in the road, so there's only so many hours in a day. So a little bit of epoxy. I don't know how super accurate. Yeah, obviously, on this stuff, you don't have to get super accurate on the measurements. At least I've never found that it didn't set up. And as you saw before, we really don't need a whole lot. It's a nice little coat all around it. It's definitely a sort of on a tool like this, that's definitely a cheaper route to go than using the good inserts that I would normally use on a lot of my stuff. So I spin it as it goes down, make sure we got even coverage, and wipe off the excess. Preferably without getting it all over my fingers. Probably could actually use some thick super glue to do the same job, but I know if copper will get hot quickly, like when we get to the point of start sanding and want to sand down over top of that copper, it'll get hot really quick, which can very quickly and easily melt super glue. But the epoxy doesn't seem to bother that. So we'll try and see if we can drill that handle out just a little bit. I'm going to go up 1/16 of an inch drill bit size. But I do need somewhere to grab a hold of it. So I'll put a little bit of a tenon down here. My chuck is dovetailed, so that's another homemade parting tool, because that steel comes in a big variety of sizes on, like I say, on Amazon. Like I say, it's all pretty reasonably priced, at least as far as I would be concerned. And even some of the real big pieces that I've gotten and made some big traditional style scrapers out of them. I mean, they're pretty much all less than 20 bucks. So we do have a way of centering this, though. So we can bring our live center back up in place, and then we'll tighten the chuck. And then we'll switch over to the drill chuck. The first time I used a brad point bit. This time we're going to use a regular metal cutting twist drill bit. Brad point bit will not go in that hole very well. No. Yeah, I know it won't. It'll want to sit out here and chatter around. So we use a metal, just a standard twist drill bit. Once again, we're not necessarily worried about getting a super clean hole. We'll drill super slow. This will probably end up making it too big. Should be able to feel when it hits the bottom of the hole that we drilled earlier, like right there. And that should maybe make it too big. I could have went up. No, that'll be perfect. So where we should have went to start with. So it just slides down in there. We can fill that up with epoxy in there. And just sort of keep an eye on it a little bit as the epoxy sets to make sure it stays straight. And then we'll have a nice little parting tool. So that's what we'll do with both of them. That's why we're set to do that. I might as well just drill the other one out. And tighten that. Need my cone center to make it centered. And we'll go back to the drill. Actually, these go in 64th, so try and be creative and go back a 64th on this one rather than going the full 16th. That one certainly isn't as well centered as the first one, but like I say, it's not gonna, surprisingly enough, it's not really gonna hurt us in any way because we'll be able to manipulate that a little bit so that it is straight or straight enough when we get to that point. I've done some of these in the past that I took the really big time and trouble to try and make a rectangular hole in something like that, where you would drill You could drill like multiple little holes and then take a chisel or something or other to get down in there. That's just, that's too much like work, really. So that one's not dry. That one is dry, but we're going to go back and do all this work pretty much between centers. Maybe the last little bit on the end we'll do differently. But for the most part, it's all spindle type work, strictly between centers. I just find it to be a little bit easier that way. Be a good place to practice with the skew if you're not familiar with using the skew or something like that. Oak is not necessarily the most friendly to use a skew on, at least for me. We'll probably start out with it and maybe go back to the other gouges because it's, for me, it's much, much slower to use for a lot of this stuff. So if we take especially like this, take a manufactured handle. This is about how long we're going to be. I think the other ones I made were about right around 10 inches long from the front to the back. Blanks are plenty long. It could even be a little bit shorter than that. It would fit better in the pack out thing that I just bought to take care of some of this stuff. So if it's a little shorter than that, that's going to be fine. And it is a parting tool, so we're not looking for leverage or anything like that. No, I put that up there for a reason. So our ferrule's there, say the barrel, the center of the barrel, something up in that area. Just switch over and use the long point so I can see better to get down in closer to where we're going to end up at. You can see that's the wonders of using the skew. I mean, that is what's called very smooth. It's some of that's would almost be a shame if you got really good at it to actually sand a piece. I just erased my mark. But I want this to get down close to the ferrule. That's pretty close. At least the glue was dry, because I'd had glue all over my finger at that point. So somewhere down in that area. It's going to be basically the bottom of the cove part. So we can give that a little mark. Of course, it's your own hand. In most cases, would be your own handle, so you can make it to match whatever hand size you have and the sort of feel that you like. In this case, this is going to be used by somebody else for a good bit of the time. Felt like I left ripples there. That's why I stopped. It's more the grain. This one actually had some grain that wanted to stand up. Place the grain must be going in multiple directions, which the Skew Masters would have an answer to do something about that, but I'm not the Skew Master, so I think we'll just proceed on. So this is our place we're going to cut it off. And actually, if we would have wanted to, we could have left that in the chuck and still kept it between centers and would have been able to cut that off back there as well. And you can remove a fairly good bite even with the skew. And then my tool rest over a little bit. Get it more centered so I can work on the whole thing at one time. Because this would be this whole area. This here I want to come down. Less of a big bulb up there. Getting a little bit of chatter out of it. We're going to have to stop here and look. Once it starts to get thinner, it almost feels like there's... And you don't use this tool all the time, so it's not leaving anything drastic. A little bit of chipped out stuff there, but you have a tendency to push too hard on it. At least I do. It wants to float along. Go in both directions. It's certainly not overly cleanly cut. Now we're getting the dreaded spiraling on it. Yeah. That means I'm pushing too hard is starting to get dull. So little diamond hone. You can hone these pretty quick and easy. Couple, 2 or 3 swipes on either side, trying to stay on the bevel the whole time. I also might have just a shade more tailstock pressure than I need. You don't need much pressure on it when you're using a skew. Just tight. As it starts to get thin, it's going to start to flex. So if we get too aggressive, it'll just stop and spin on the stab center. We can also use our hand on the back. Makes it a little challenging with oak, because that stuff is sort of splintery when it comes off if your finger gets too close to it. But that eliminated the ripples. Not that they won't sand out or something like that, but we'd have to sand them out. I think we'll cheat back here. We'll just use the parting tool and get rid of some of this. And we'll go back here. This time we'll use the long point down. Just easier back here. So they say. And also, a lot of times they'll give you a cleaner cut on certain stuff. Get rid of the corner because you're going to run a little bit of a bead there. It still looks plenty fat. Can always stop and check it. It's not too fat, but I mean, it's still plenty fat back there. Of course, that'll force somebody in the teaching episode of it that their hand is automatically going to go there than rather try and grab a hold of something that's bigger and fatter. But proportionally, I don't think it looks very good as it stands now. We'll take a little bit more off of that. Always cutting downhill. Long point's a little hard. I don't have that down to a science as far as to make roll beads over like that with it. But it would be a really good thing to actually practice and use it more so. I don't have a problem rolling a bead to the left using the short point because you can always see it's when you get in trouble with going to the right, then you can't necessarily see what you're doing as well. At least for me, put it that way. I think that looks good enough for what it is. I think we'll sand most of this. Not worried too much about that area at this point. And then we'll have to think about whether we're going to be real creative with it or just up and finish it as a natural piece of oak. I did go back to 180 there to start because I don't get the ripple free finish that those guys, if you watch any of those guys that are production turners that use this spew and turn every day, all day. I correct my mistakes with sandpaper like most of the rest of the people. They don't take very long to sand because you can get a lot of sandpaper in a very in contact with the wood quickly. We can go out over the copper at the end to smooth that up and make it all nice and shiny. Take off the harsh edge out there. And it is a tool handle, so I mean, do we really need to get super, super smooth? No, not really. Want it to be comfortable in your hand, smooth to the touch. At least that's my opinion of it. Do we need it 100% scratch free? Not unless we're going to add some color to it. So we can sand a little bit with the grain. Takes care of any of the radial scratches. This has some really big, quite big open grain in it. Except sanding with the grain, then I messed up my copper a little bit. Just contemplating a little bit. I'm going to take this end down more than what it is. The rest of this I will do with a spindle gouge because I am much better at the spindle gouge than I am the skew, so there's no point in having one of those moments of destroying something at the very end. When we go around the corner, that is pure end grain, so it needs to be cut cleanly. We should be able to take this down pretty small. Getting my curve a little bit out of whack there. It doesn't want to remove big quantities of material, so you have to be patient with it. It's a little better to make 100 small cuts than it is to make one giant size mistake. So we're down to about quarter of an inch, maybe a little bit more. Still like this curve is still not really there. Like I said earlier, this is one place that needs to be cut, not sanded. I think that's all right. I gotta spend all night on that, on something like that. Say it's not. So we're back 320. Just blend any of those little ripple marks in. 400. And I'll come back in. Spindle gouge, I think, could use a little touching up. I'm going to touch it up with just a hone a little bit. It's just a matter of rolling it up around the nose a couple times. You can also go up and down with it. We are going to break that free right where it's at least really close to it. Probably kind of taking a chance with this oak because oak is kind of brittle. So we might not get too carried away. I'd like to get it down to something a little less than what it is. Get it down to more like an eighth of an inch. I have to think whether I'm going to do something exciting with it. Kind of stuck on one color of dye right at the moment, so I think I'm going to try it. Really just out of curiosity. I might not do, probably not going to do the grain filling part of it. Might just dye it a color and see what it looks like. I mean, because they're starting with brown, basically, a brown color. We could get really, creative. We could do the blue. We could do, oh, I have an orange. How about we do orange? Let's see what orange will do for this. And it is a pretty bright orange. Yeah, I like that. Not really worried if it goes over the ferrule. It can be orange too. Why not? It'll dye. These alcohol-based dyes, they're very potent stuff. They'll pretty much dye anything that it come in contact with. So we'll get down in there as far as we can. Now we got a bright orange tool handle. Still brings out some of the grain, for sure. That's kind of interesting. What I should have done was sprayed it with some alcohol first. It would open the pores up even more and would have accepted more dye right off the bat. But I'll go back over the second time. It'll make it a darker, brighter orange than it was the first time. It's really not doing a whole lot. It looks good on the copper, but as it dries, it's not very impressive. As always, we're going to take our paper towel, open it up, lay it on the side of the trash can, let it dry. Doesn't take very long to dry, so I'm going to take a paper towel, we'll turn it back on, and we'll sort of burnish that a little bit, because it may, well, no may about it, it would most likely have raised some grain. So the paper towel is like sanding with 800 or 1,000 grit sandpaper. It has an abrasive quality to it. Huh. Interesting. I don't know what color I would have that would make that contrast pop. And now what would probably make it pop would be a white. I don't think I really have a white. But I do have shellac in the airbrush from last week. So there's lots and lots of big open grain in something like this, so that would maybe look pretty neat. I think we'll have a go with it. And let's flex her back on. reason I use a dust collector is so that I don't have this misty cloud of mist and shellac floating around in the air. And it's going into a cyclone separator, so it's not going directly into my dust collection system. So the shellac is to seal the outside surface and leave these pores open. So at this point, we're going to sit this off to dry, and then we'll work on the other one. Because we do have two of them to do. There's a quality glove. Want to pull the fingers off and the whole thing comes apart. Probably why they are so cheap to purchase. So we have our other one from earlier. And get the teeth back in where they were at. Little snug. And away we go. This time we might just go back to more traditional tools. I gotta sharpen I know my little spindle gouge is dull. Watching me with this skew has got to be very, very boring. Especially turning oak. If we were turning something soft, that's kind of fun, but the oak is not soft by any means. I used to have, there it is. I say I had a mark on here on that. It should be pretty close. Nope. Close enough. I like the wings on mine pretty much straight across, as straight as I can keep them, which is not always very straight. That's also an 80 grit wheel. I've been too lazy to change it. I normally have a 180 on there. The 80 grit does some nice stuff for me because you see it makes it that much quicker. Put the edge back on. That is always one of the big questions in classes is how do you know when to sharpen your tool? And the simple answer is when it gets dull. But how do you know when it's dull? Like that spindle roughing gouge, you're starting to have to put more pressure on it than what you think. Same way with this little spindle gouge. I was having to apply more pressure to make it cut the way it should cut. So we'll do most of this probably with the roughing gouge because it will do everything but fine detail. It'll do it pretty quickly and efficiently. We'll reduce our diameter off the bat because we know we need some. won't be able to get down into that corner with it. So we'll pick up a normal spindle gas to finish off the last little bit out to the copper. Somewhere back in about here. Go from both directions. You probably should have a measurement, would be a really good thing. Before we get too carried away. So thereabouts. As to where we're going to end. Then we can actually make a little parting cut in there so we know where it's at. A wonderful tool to make long, sweeping turns. See, it remains a fairly good material, even doing that. Is it super smooth? Well, that might be a different case, but same scenario, we're getting thinner. I'm putting too much pressure on it. I can hear it starting to chatter in there. So that also means it was leaving spiral lines, which we don't necessarily want. Well, thank you. Yeah, I had trouble with the audio a couple weeks ago because the noise canceling can actually work too well. Then becomes sort of muffled and whatnot. So yeah, there are some of that. They're bringing in really close. They're like spiral lines coming across. And that's really me being too aggressive with what I'm doing. So we can go back. A little spindle guide. Bring up that area. And do the same thing over here. Really didn't eliminate much of what I was trying to, for whatever reason. Trying to hurry along too much, I guess. Yeah. Did you see that in? Then we'll go back over. Just give it a little support. It's really all it takes. Not go back uphill though. I realize this sort of blocks what I'm doing, but you can actually feel the vibration in your hand if you're pushing too hard. If your hand can get very hot if you push, if you squeeze too hard. to try and make something thin. Okay, that's close enough to the shape that we need. Cheat a little bit. Remove the material. Just less bulky stuff that we got to remove. Let's keep telling yourself it's a tool handle. It's not something stylish and fancy. Should be paying a little bit more attention to the spindle gouge. Now we have less support yet. If I really want to cap it. Leave well enough in it. You can see, if you look at this down here, it shows on the screen. This actually is not even spinning close to true down there. So that hole, when we enlarged that hole, it did not quite do what it should have done. So just like before, we'll give it a fan, smooth all the ripples out. Sharp piece of sandpaper is better. So what I'm looking at right now, we're looking to get rid of is any of the tool marks, the little zips and bumps all that good stuff. I'm not going to go around that corner on the end grain, not at 180 grit. I'll wait till I get to 320 to go around that. So if I put 180 grit scratches in it, they're very, very hard to get out. So just, it's cut clean. There is some little ripples in there. That's a dark spot right there. I'm going to look at that. I'm not sure whether this piece is red oak or white oak. It has some of the flecking that a white oak would have. And that means it's harder than the surrounding area. So the more I sand, the more it's going to sand the area around that hard spot and not sand the hard spot, if that makes any kind of remote sense. So if I do little circles as I'm coming across, it helps to keep those scratches from being straight across. Now this is this is red. This is an oak. Beech has much. If I had some beech in it, that I would make the handles out of beech because it's prettier. It's a little bit lighter weight as far as weight goes, but I don't have any big enough for this. There's where the sloppiness in the epoxy comes back to haunt you a little bit. When I wiped it off, it went up over that copper tubing. Got some big globs. Grab a knife. And with this epoxy, the longer I stand on there, the warmer it gets. It just sort of melts it and smears it rather than sands it off. I found just take a utility knife, cut it off, and then we'll go back and clean up some more. That cleans it right off. Now we have a nice shiny bit of copper. Clean that end off. We are at 320. Got to sand that down there, which is now dull. And we'll stop and staying with the grain to make sure we don't have any of those pesky little radial scratches in places we don't want. Ferrule is still not very clean. Well, okay. You're talking about me running it over the edge of the lathe. A lot of times we use a tool rest. What I was taught, this goes back a few years, as in a lot of few years. Let me think here a second. 63. So high school for me would have been 50 years ago, something like that. 50, yeah, around 50 years ago. My shop teacher that we had always talked about when you pick up a brand new piece of sandpaper, take it and run it up over an edge. You can do it in both directions. And what it does is there's glue holding your grit onto the backing. So that breaks it and makes it more flexible. And if you don't, what happens is, we're sanding something round. If you were sanding something flat, it probably wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. But sanding something round, it'll allow it to bend and curl much easier that way. It does work. Try it. It does make a difference. It makes your sandpaper much more pliable. Now, some of the cloth back, well, even the cloth back, I have some cloth back stuff. Oh, no, that's not cloth. Maybe it is. Like the cloth back type sandpaper or whatever. You can do the same thing with that, and you'll hear it. I mean, my mic's not going to pick it up very well, but you'll hear it sound like it's cracking, and it is cracking. It's cracking the glue in between on the sandpaper. It does work. Try it. It doesn't make your sandpaper last any longer or anything like that, but it does help it. So this time I'm going to spray it with alcohol because we're going to color this one too. Just boring if it's plain wood. Spray it down, denatured alcohol, wipe it dry. It's going to pick up the dirt out of the grain, which is the grain that we want to fill maybe. But at any rate, it'll pick up the dirt out of the grain. And it dries very, very quickly. So it opens the pores up so that we can do some more of the good stuff and give it some color. Just kind of see how much. This one probably is not a real great candidate for the grain fill. It may work though. Let's see. What haven't we used? Oh, we haven't done. I've sort of always been a fan of the chestnut spirit stains, but this is a artisan that you would get from Craft Supply. It's an alcohol-based dye. I didn't put a second glove on. I spritzed it on my hand. These alcohol-based dyes will dye just about everything it comes in contact with. Skin, the bed of the lathe. It's really sort of a good idea to cover up as much as what you can. This is a green, so we'll put some green on it. If we don't like it, well, we'll do something different with it. And this it's what I thought it was going to be and what I think it's going to be. The blue that I got from them is really a really super bright blue, and this green is sort of along the same lines, and it's very bright. The chestnut green is it's green, but it's a darker green, put it that way, than what this is. So we'll get down there as far as what we can. I'm not really, like I say, it's a tool handle. If I really was super stupid about it, I could grip it on the ferrule down there. Chances of gripping it on the ferrule without putting marks on it is another scenario. But like I say, this is a tool handle. It's going to be used in the classroom. So I'm going to more work than probably what I should already. So there we are, green. Did darken it up with the second, sort of the second coat on it. So it is a little darker than what I thought maybe it would get. But we're starting, you gotta keep in mind, the other simple thing when it comes to that is we're starting with a dark background already. The background was already a brownish color in the red oak, in the oak. I'm gonna burnish it. You just use a paper towel. It's gonna pull some of the color back off, a little bit of the color maybe. Also, because it is alcohol based, it's gonna raise the grain. We put alcohol on it. We also put the dye over top of it, which all is alcohol based. So it's going to have a tendency to raise the grain. Could have, should have did a little better. When you start dyeing things, like I said, this is a tool handle. You can't see it in the screen, probably especially if I stick my face shield in front of the screen. There's some little scratch lines down here that would be the radial type scratch lines. So when you start dyeing things, things that matter, you have to be very vigilant on your standing. So we're going to seal this. Well, my choice of sealer is the D-Wax Shellac. This is a Zinsser Seal Coat, which is like a 1 pound cut. I'm just going to put a nice even coat all the way out across it. And that's it. What I'm looking to do is seal the top surface and leaving the open pores, leave them remain open. So if I was to put that on, I don't make out real well putting it on by hand. I could, but you get too much down into the pores of the wood, and then we're back to the scenario of the grain filler does not go down into the grain. So I found that the airbrush, a simple airbrush, it's actually a very inexpensive airbrush. I mean, this piece would actually look probably kind of looked interesting right off the bat because it left the grain, the big open pore part of the grain, it sort of has made them black or darker in color. But we might be able to improve on that. So let's hit this one off. So that's number two. We'll go back to number one because the shellac should be dry on number one. And it's orange, in case you can't tell. So, what color do we want to try on orange? Hmm. There will be more. Yes. What this is going to do, the shellac coat for this, actually, if I was going to leave this alone, that's a tool handle. It's yeah, that's it's just kind of showing a process of doing some of this stuff. And it's a tool handle. If I was going to leave this tool handle just plain orange, the other one plain green, I would give that several hours or probably overnight to dry. And I would put one simple coat of the Parfix 3408 CA on there, buff it, and I'm done. It's just as good of a finish, especially for a tool handle. That's what I finish almost everything of mine with, anyhow. Um, I'm thinking the iridescent ones definitely won't show up. But yes, we're gonna play around and give it a little bit of a color. Yeah, you won't lose it that way, right? So, see what happens with a little bit of blue in there. Blue and orange might look kind of neat. Also might make it a different color. Okay. The blue's going to highlight the grape. That'll work. So what this is the Chroma Guild. Oh yeah. Yep. I agree 100%. A lot of times, if I had any more of it, a lot of times I made tool handles. A lot of my tool handles are made out of the Spectra ply, the colored plywood stuff. And yeah, it just makes it easier. You don't lose them very quickly. They don't get misplaced. Nobody would even think of relocating one of them and stealing it, out of class or something like that because it would be too sort of too unique, I guess you would say. So the blue is going to give it some color, some highlights. This is the guild. It's made by Chromacraft. It's called Chroma Guild, and yes, it is an oil-based gilder's paste, I guess you would consider it. I'm not sure where they're going to go with this now. If you're familiar with any of the bigger names in the wood turning world as far as demonstrating and things like that, a fellow by the name of Nick Agar passed away recently. He was one of the big advocates and worked with these people at Chromacraft to get a lot of these colors out there. So I'm not sure. This is sort of one of their standard colors. They're starting to make more and more of them. So what I've done, I put a coat on there, used my paper towel, and I spun the lathe. Kind of an easy way of getting some of it back off. And I'll just do little random order circles. And there's places I can see already. There's places I've missed. Places the grain is not as open as others. Like right there, I mean, that's a nice open grain that scratches. That's the other wonders of sanding and doing any of this other kind of stuff to things. This gilder's paste is thin enough that it will show the scratches. It will fill that little cavity, so to speak, of the scratches. So it's not great. I mean, it's kind of expensive. I think it's kind of expensive. It's like 17 or $18 for that little tube, but that little tube has lasted me a very long time because you don't use much of it. You're using it, but it's just kind of a maybe a little bit of a hard pill to swallow to spend 17 or $18 on a little teeny little tube of something. But if it gives you the same scenario, if it gives you the end result and gives you a really neat result on something, then of course, as far as I'm concerned, then it's always, worth the money. I do have some of theirs that I got back in January that are iridescent, and those I can say that I am not overly thrilled with, but I only played with them a little bit. I need to do a little bit more with them. But these simple plain colors do just well. No, just the opposite. Yeah, yeah, you got to have the background color, and it has to be sealed, whether it's shellac or a sanding sealer or whatever. This has to be sealed so that it doesn't change the color, the background color, if that makes sense. So if I would do this without sealing it, it would change the orange to, I'm not a color master, so it would change the orange to whatever color that orange and blue would make, if that makes sense. So you can let this stuff dry a little bit. It is an oil-based product, but it dries very, very quickly. If you do something bigger than this, I can show you another piece here in a couple of minutes that I was working on the last couple of weeks and doing basically the same thing with it. I can even leave this go at this point if I don't necessarily think I'm going to like what it's going to turn out like, looking like, or I've been too sloppy or something like that. I can let that go overnight, even a couple days from now, and come back with some mineral spirits, and it'll reactivate it, and you can wipe off areas that you were messy in or something like that. It's like I said, it's kind of a neat product to work with. So as it's starting to set up, what I'm doing is going with the grain now, and I'm really wiping off these areas in between the bigger, fatter grain. I probably could even do it with the lathes running. Like I say, it dries. It does, even though it's an oil-based stuff, it's so thin that it dries very, very quickly. And if we get it to where we're happy with it, which it is a tool handle, so I'm going to be happy with it, I will spray it again with coated shellac to seal that in, and then that will stay at that point. And then some other evening this week, and I use a water-based lacquer generally. I do have the rattle can. This kind of stuff I could just do with a rattle can and have good success with it. But I use a water-based lacquer in building furniture, so I have that available to me. It'll spray just as well out of the airbrush as what it will out of the $700 or $800 turbine sprayer to spray it. So I think we're good. Good enough, like I say, it's good enough for a tool handle that's going to go and be used and reused. So now I'm just spraying another coat of shellac, trying to stay a nice even coat of shellac over it. I gave it a nice shine. That'll be what it looks like once it's all lacquered up. Which now, in all essence, when it comes to the finishing part on something like this or a piece of furniture or whatever, now I've put 2 layers of shellac on. So in all reality, 2 layers at most of a lacquer over top of that, and it's done. Tool handle, it may only get one get over top of that because it'll definitely probably get all banged up and beat up long before the finish would fail. So that's the orange one. The green one feels like it's dry enough. Okay. Have a this this is a product you can buy at Hobby Lobby, maybe? One of them. Hobby Lobby, Michaels. It's made by Deco Art. This is a white. If I remember right, this does. No, maybe I'm not going to use this. Hmm, look how funky. I guess we're not using white. Guess that's why it was cheap. Has wax in it. I don't know what else it has in it. Hmm. Guess we're not using that one. We get clean gloves because now we're contaminating color to color grain. Hmm. We go really weird and go pink. I don't think. What's pink and green gonna make? Pink is this pink has drove me nuts because it doesn't do what I want it to do. We might try it though. Yeah, that's kind of why I picked up the pink. But the pink is sort of a pain because it doesn't. If it picks up the color underneath it, this is definitely a whole different texture than the Gilder's paste. It's actually a wax-based product. Let's see, it's probably my guess is it always wants to turn purple. I talked to a guy that actually sells this stuff. This stuff is made over in the UK, but there's a lot of places there's some places that are selling it here in the US. And he said it had to be over white. Yeah, that'll be kind of a waste there. It's not going to show. It's not going to show up at all. Because he showed me some pieces. He said, "Oh, it's got to be white." And I'm like, "Well, the other one's got to be black." And it was kind of educational in some ways for both of us. Oh, the green is going to be light. The green lighter than this. I don't think green on green is going to give me what I'm looking for either. Yeah, it's just sort of made Sort of made the grain shimmer a little bit. Still not it. Copper, copper might be a ticket. Copper's the ticket. That's gonna stand out. Yep. So I do little circles with this stuff and really sort of work it down into the grain, into the open part of the grain. Now a little bit goes a long way. I just keep going back over some of those places that were heavier and just smears it on down the road. I put it between my, there's a little dab on the end of it, and I'm smearing around on the end of my finger, gloved finger, mind you. I've seen people doing this without gloves on, and I'm like, nope, not me. I don't want to walk around with gold finger or any colored fingers for quite a period of time. Normally, the wood that I would generally would use for something this process is usually ash. It's lighter in color, so you get better sort of a better contrast of color. Although this oak, I was surprised it actually come out as nicely as what it did with dyeing it. I would have figured it was gonna not do as well. But we'll get some of it wiped off. It shows up pretty good. So we'll just get the whole way around the piece. You can do this on um, like pieces that maybe you use one of the texturing tools or something like that on. That's another good area to use some of these, um, especially the Guild paste, Gilder's cream stuff. You'd want to do this. It's still the same process though. If you're gonna do like in the texturing and things like that, you're still gonna want to seal it first and probably put a little some sort of color on it, color on the surrounding area rather than. How in the world did you miss a whole area? So that sort of makes the grain pop out, gives it a little bit of a shimmer, which is what I'm after. Light pressure when you do that. You don't want to drag a bunch of it out. Once again, like I did before, I'm going to go back over it. There's all kind of there's all kind of sanding scratches in this one, but like I say, it's a tool handle conversation piece in a wood turning class that, we could do something like this at some point in maybe some sort of a future class, that we could do this in a class setting and you would go home with something of interest. Not that they don't go home with something of interest, but this would be something more of interest. It would probably be a much longer than probably be more than a 3 hour class. But so now we can seal it. Hopefully there's enough shellac left in there. I'm gonna make a mess. Not enough, not quite enough shellac in the container. Sort of spitting at it. And that airbrush, that style airbrush is a siphon feed. I like better than the top feed ones, especially for what I use it for. The siphon feed, all I do is pour that shellac back out here when I'm done. Put a little bit of denatured alcohol in it. Spray it through the gun, spray it through the brush, and it's clean and done. Where those top feed ones, and I could never get them. I couldn't get them to be clean enough just by doing that with them. Don't spray too much on it; it will run. That's blemishes. Well, almost looks like I got some orange peely running. It's on there pretty thick. The wonders of shellac too, especially the very thin shellac like that. I mean, it is pretty forgiving because it does dry so fast. Of course, my water-based lacquer actually dries very fast too. Almost all the lacquers do. I think that's going to be a wrap. It's 8:15, so that's 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. Um, Anybody have any questions, comments? I know it's too pretty to use as a tool handle, but that is what it's going to be. And it will be a parting tool. This other one should be dry. Still a little bit. It's not sticky or anything, but So if you weren't there earlier, I drilled the hole big enough for these blanks to go down in. I probably, in all reality, I won't take this off until I've glued this piece in, because this way it sits up straight up and down for me. And I'll just use a little bit of the like Amazing Clear Cast epoxy, something like that. Not a deep pour epoxy, an epoxy that's going to set up reasonably quickly. Put some down in, shove that down in there, fill the entire void up on both sides of it. Let it go, and it's good to go. And in all reality, I could probably actually do them even tonight, because I could. Nah, won't do that. Much easier if I have the ability to either hold these upright to spray them, take them outside with the rattle can lacquer, or use my water-based lacquer in the airbrush and spray them right here on there. And then I'll put the tool into it, into the handle. So that's the two contrasting colors. Kind of like the orange one myself, but the green is neat as well. I think I have some other ones that are green too. Well, that's good. I'm always pleased when somebody has learned something new. Well, you're telling me something new. I can't say I've ever heard anybody putting shellac on with a tampon. Um, that would be, they would consider that French polishing? Is that what they would be considering that? Because you're saying about putting it on multiple directions. So that would be using a shellac to do French polishing, if I understand what you're telling me. Yeah, I should have left that alone. Yeah, and I'm always looking for ways of taking basically a plain piece of wood and making it look like something, I guess we'd say something worth more than what it maybe would appear. So you've basically taken a plain piece of oak, in this case, gave it some color and added some filler to the grain to make it look like it's something extraordinary or out of the ordinary, I guess you would say, rather than just plain wood. I was going to show you, maybe, I have it, yeah, it's down here. Show you another piece that actually, if you go back, I did this, a lot of this one, or almost all this one on stream as well over the last couple weeks. Show you this one. This one is the bright blue and the purple grain fill. This is a piece of ash. This lid it needs its shellac, and then all of it needs lacquered. But the inside and the bottom of the lid are natural. So it is something a little bit different. It's a lidded and it's square. It is square. It is a piece. turn square, left square. I'm not sure that I totally like it, but that's probably why it really hasn't gone any further than what it is. But it's basically the same process we just did with these two handles, where it's colored, sealed, grain filled, resealed, and then it will get lacquered over top of that, all that stuff as well. And like in my case, the reasoning for the second coat of shellac over top of the grain filler, and I think a lot of people, like a lot of the people that I've seen demonstrate this stuff, do the same thing. They're sealing it, putting the grain fill on, they seal over top of that, and then if you want to put some sort of a lacquer or whatever you want, because there again, if you're using shellac, the sky's the limit. You can put pretty much anything over top of shellac. You can use water-based, oil-based, lacquered, and it all sticks to it. So it's just kind of a universal type sealer. So, other than that, that's going to be it for me. Back to the grind of work tomorrow. I will not be here next Saturday. Next Saturday I have a class. So these two handles will be done. I'll manage to figure out that little bit of time that I need to get them done this week, but they will get done and assembled this week so that I can use them for my class next weekend. Um, and like I say, on a class day, I don't get dream that night because it's already been long enough day because I do 2 3-hour classes, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and by then my feet generally are done. So it will be 2 weeks till we get back. So stop back and say hi again. Until then, y'all have a good week.